Good morning and welcome to the new episode of Dr. Lamba's Weekly Call. Indian first Prime Minister immediately after independence, or rather even 2 years before independence, Jawaharlal Nehru was once the darling of the nation. And he had a magnetic personality, as I remember him myself from my connection with him. But today, a systematic, well planned, Goebbelsian campaign is being launched. Not to dislodge him because he cannot be dislodged, but to create an aura of depicting him as inefficient, dishonest, and even anti-national. He's sought to be projected as a person who was a bane for the country rather than being a boon for the country. All his contributions to the development of the country are being negated. It is being forgotten that it is for his vision that India is where it's today. The first man in Asia to think of nuclear power, and we set up our nuclear energy way back in the 50s, early 50s, when Homi Bhabha imported at his instance Cyrus reactor and first Tarapur nuclear power plant was set up. It was his vision that 5-year plans were initiated. First emphasis being on agriculture to make India self-sufficient in food so that the Bengal famine could not happen again. And a green revolution came into being. Then the second 5-year plan where the emphasis was on the basic and the cottage industry, and India became a leading industrial organization country today because of that. And not only that, Indian products, the small scale sector gave employment to the millions. It was he who was able to ensure that the country remained peaceful, secular, democratic. He could easily have become a dictator. As a matter of fact, he had so much of aura around him that despite the defeat of 1962, somebody asked President Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan, why don't you dismiss him? And he said, well, if I dismiss him, that's not difficult. Nehru would accept my decision, resign, and go back to Ram Leela ground, give a talk, and the cries of Chacha Nehru Zindabad would once again force me to invite him to be the Prime Minister. There's no alternative. Who after Nehru was the dread subject which people even shudder to think of? The whole nation was paralyzed on May 27, 1964, when he died. And people couldn't believe. And India, what is today, whether it's science and technology, whether it's agriculture, is there because of him. Yes, he had his drawbacks. Who doesn't have it? Every great man has some defects. Look at anybody, whether it was Krishna, he could have stopped Kurukshetra, he did not, he could not. Guru Nanak, he didn't care for his children. Christ, no, I'm not putting him at par with them. No, no way, don't think. But he had his defects. He was mistaken in the belief that the trust in the UN would only make the country secular, and he committed to have a plebiscite so that democratic principles could be lived. Well, if a person has no mistake, no errors in his capability, but one thing great about Nehru was that he did not suffer from hubris. I remember my first meeting with him. We started with his patronizing tone towards the child. I was hardly 12 at that time. First time I had met him, I was 7. Second time, 12. Third time, 15. But the moment we started talking, he changed. And he became a sort of my companion at a mental level. I grew up. I grew to his level. Anyway, that was personal. Now, I'm coming to the fact that the way stories were concocted, circulated with a speed that is almost phenomenal. Goebbels, Hitler's propaganda minister, said you repeat a lie 1,000 times and becomes the truth, and that's what ought to be done. A few days back, I saw a post on Facebook. It listed 8 items, and I find, after did my scrutiny, that these are the 8 items being circulated and recirculated, with the result that the people mostly believe it. And all the 8 items are absolutely ridiculous. For example, it's written in that post that in 1950-51, King Tribhuvan of Nepal proposed to merge Nepal with India. Absolutely false, wrong. As a matter of fact, there was a revolt by Ranas against the monarchy. King Tribhuvan had to leave Kathmandu, come to Delhi to seek refuge. He was a political exile, and Ranas were the feudal lords. As a matter of fact, their coming would have only made Nepal a country pillaged, robbed, raped by these feudal lords who had no, shall I say, civic sense at all. So King Tribhuvan came as a refugee, had discussion with Nehru, and Nehru asked him, what does he want? He said, look here, I like a refugee. He said, no, you go back to Kathmandu and rule it properly, but then try to be more constitutional. An army contingent was sent, and he was restored to the throne. There was zero talk of merger, absolutely not. And yet it's concocted that he wanted to do that. Second, Canada, false. In 1948, according to that post, Nawab Khan of Balochistan requested that the Balochistan be united with India. Now, 1948, partition had taken place. Borders had been clearly demarcated. Kashmir war had started. Balochistan and India are not joined together. There's a huge chunk of land mass separating India from Balochistan. So how could India accept it? Secondly, there was never any Nawab of Balochistan. It's amazing that the people do not even look at the facts. Balochistan had never a Nawab. It was the chief commissioner's province. It had 4 princely states under the British Raj in colonial era. 4 separate states. And the provincial Shai Jalga and the non-official members of the Quetta Assembly on 29th of June 1947 voted unanimously and opted to join Pakistan. Out of the 4 princely states, 3 of them, Makran, Lasbela, Karan, acceded to Pakistan in 1947, immediately after independence. The ruler of the 4th princely state, Khan of Kalak, he used to call Jinnah his father. And he wanted independence the way Kashmir Maharaja wanted independence. Hyderabad wanted independence. Junagadh wanted independence. So he also wanted independence. which was not accepted, and it was united with Pakistan. So the fact that there is no Nawab of Pakistan to say that the Nawab of Balochistan, so to say that Nawab of Balochistan and White wanted to join is absolutely figment of imagination. Then the third thing which made me laugh was the third and the fourth, that in 1950 he donated cocoa islands to Burma, and then Burma sold them to China. Wow, what sort of the world these guys are living in? If they had known the facts of the history, Cocoa Islands were always a part of Burma. In 1882, Cocoa Islands officially became part of the British Burma, not of British India. And when Burma separated from India in 1937, became a self-governing crown colony, then the islands remained a Burmese territory. So how could Nehru give something? And then they are beyond even Bangladesh. They were never a part of India. They were always a part of Burma. So how could Nehru give something to Burma which did not belong to it? And yet, but then these are the people who are there. Then another thing which came up, which made me laugh, that he donated an area of 22,000 square kilometers of Kawau Valley to Burma. I don't know. Their dreams can be nightmares of the country. The Kawau Valley is also called Kabwa Valley and Kubo Valley. I have been there. It's a highland valley in Myanmar, that's in Burma, Western Saging Division, and it's located between Hirok and Zoma range of the mountains. The Chinwin River, also called the Ningthi River, passes through it, and it is just on the border of Manipur state. It's a valley to number of ethnic groups, including Pauna and Kathi, Medzi, Thodu, Kuki, Mizos, Kanan. During the first Anglo-Burmese War, and way back in 1813, the Manipur Prince Gambhir Singh conquered Kabo Valley from Burma. So it was a part of Burma, he conquered it, okay. But the Burmans were able to prove to the British resident, Major Burney, that the valley had to be ceded to Burma back by the Manipur king Marjit Singh in 1813. So it went back and it was given to the Burma. Nehru did not give it. What happened was that the British said, as usual, to the Manipur king, okay, you give back the valley, let's have peace, and we'll give you 500 rupees as a compensation. And that compensation started being given. Now imagine, when the valley was given way back in 1834, at that time, Nehru's grandfather, Gangadhar Nehru, was around 7 years old. And if you want to read it, the historical evidence is there in archaeology department of India. There is a document, the taking of Cabo Valley, a possibility. It was prepared by the strategic group of the Indian Army. So what Nehru did was he discontinued the payment rupees 500 to the Manipur province because he said, no, that's not available. So that was the only thing he did. Maharaja Gambhir Singh, then the king of Manipur, demanded a compensation, which was not given. So how could that be accepted? This is travesty of history and the reality. Then comes another thing, that in 1947, the country of Oman offered Gwadar port to another country, and this was not accepted. Then Pakistan purchased this. Now, again, the history of this is very different. Yes, it's correct that Gwadar was a city owned by Oman, and Oman wanted to sell it because they could not control it. So they go, but they did not sell it to India. The beauty is it was sold to Pakistan, and Pakistan did not have the money to buy it. So Aga Khan came into picture. What Aga Khan did was he paid 5 billion rupees. 5 billion at that time was more than 500 billion today to Oman, and the city was given to Pakistan. Now, Pakistan could have it because it adjoins Pakistan. How could India have it in between the whole Pakistan? You know, it's like the tragedy that Pakistan had. You have a small city and the intervening country. So it would have been a off province or an off city which India could not even control. So why have that at all? As a matter of fact, that was very sensible. The city is located on the shores of Arabian Sea. And in 1958, Aga Khan gave $5 billion. And let me again be made clear that no offer was ever made to India. So the question of his acceptance. Then another canal that in the war with China in 1962, Air Force was denied permission to operate. Denied operation. As a matter of fact, the operations are decided by the armed forces chiefs together. They are never decided by the political leadership. What Nehru did was that he asked for the opinion. And the Indian political and the military leadership, including the military leadership, would not use offensive air powers to stop PLA, the Chinese army. What was the capability of Indian Air Force? Let's see. Total Indian Air Force had 22 combat squadrons and 500 aircrafts. That was the mainstay of Indian Air Force. And it comprised of Hunter MK-56 fighter bombers, great interceptors, aircrafts, and French-built anti-aircraft Mystery and Tufani. PLA Air Force was equipped with MiG-15, MiG-17, MiG-19, and medium Illusion 28 bombers. So compared to that, so the government asked for the input from Intelligence Bureau, and Intelligence Bureau said that in case we use air power, the result will be that the Chinese Air Force, which is much stronger, would attack Indian cities like Calcutta, and India would not be able to protect them. Then this question was referred to the Army headquarters, and the Chief of Air Staff arrived at the conclusion himself that the positions were so interlocked that quite possibly if Indian Air Force is used, Indian Army troops might suffer because the Air Force would not be able to differentiate at that time. Air Marshal SP Engineer, he agreed with Intelligence Bureau assessment that Air Force should not be used and it was kept out of the conflict. H.C. Diwan, an officer in charge of the air operations, clearly stated it was I who advised not to use fighters and bombers against the Chinese. As army got more and more bogged down in Nifa, it was quite difficult to hold Nehru back. He wanted to launch front fighters, but had he done so, it would have disastrous consequences. So Nehru wanted to launch, and people are alleging that he didn't want to launch. You remember in 1962, a book was published by Neville Maxwell, India-Chinese War. And he said that the government had decided that a tactical air sport with bombers on ground attack must be ruled out because of the fear of the Chinese retaliation. Considering the trend of NIFA and limitation of AIF, the intervention would have a much adverse effect. Air Chief Marshal Arjun Subramaniam also writes, with joint Army Air Force structure in place at the core level and forward Air Force control, is clear that Air Force top was timid and deficient and they did not want to participate. On August 4, so that's there. Unfortunately, these facts are not known to people and they are not supposed to be known to people. But to say that it was Nehru who stopped Air Force, rather he wanted Air Force to attack. But he could not do it because that would have been disastrous for the country. Then they say that American president offered Nehru a nuclear plant, which he refused. Another stupid thing. The offer was not about a nuclear plant. The offer was to test nuclear bomb. As a matter of fact, Nehru had ordered way back on 3rd of August 1954 that the Indian Department of Atomic Energy be created under the direct charge of Nehru. And as I said earlier, the Tarapur Atomic Power Station was set up. But of course, when the US president wanted him to test the nuclear bomb, he said, no, my country is not a guinea pig. That was an act of capability, intelligence, and protection of the country. Because, the Americans wanted to detonate an American device from the top of a tower in Rajasthan desert, which Nehru did not agree. Then, one thing which is there, that he was offered a permanent member. A lot of talk is about there. It was never there. There were heated debates in that body, whether India should be offered or not. And China already has a seat. Again, they said that Nehru offered a seat. No. When UNO was formed, China was the original member, so was India. But China was also a regional member of the Security Council. The only thing is that at that time, China was represented not by the mainland China, but by Taiwan, because USA and other European powers did not recognize China, the Communist China, as represented China. Then KMT China, Communist China. Taiwan was thought to be representing China. So how could Nehru give China or offer, say, China the Chinese seat? Nehru's skepticism about accepting the offer was that he didn't want to disrupt the dynamics. And it was absolutely a figment of imagination to say that he was offered. And all that talk, actually what had happened was that in 1955, Soviet Union had said that India should be offered. It was a proposal. And it was never accepted because the other countries did not accept it. The context of the US offer was that it would be a non-voting member. And do you know at that time the chairperson of the UNO was none other than Vijay Lakshmi Pandit, Nehru's sister. She was there till early 1960s. And she wrote to Brother that what should she respond to USA? And he said, if there's a confirmed offer, we'll take it. But proposals we will not even discuss. What was really happening was that there was a pressure being built up on USA to throw Taiwan out, not China. But they didn't want to bring China in. So they said, okay, let some more the other suspend China. which Nehru did not like. So the whole talk was absolutely meaningless and it was not there. And the last is not a canon. Yes, he accepted Kashmir issues, resolution through UNO. That was a mistake, absolutely a mistake. His offer of plebiscite in Kashmir was absolutely a mistake. But as I said earlier, who doesn't make a mistake? But looking at other performances, his contribution to building up this country as a great country as it exists today is unparalleled. And all these attempts are attempts of David throwing stones. Nothing would come out of them except to vitiate the atmosphere of the country. And it, in fact, necessarily shows that that group of people is mentally incapable of honest thought, and they had better understand that selling the image of the Prime Minister who made India, who created India out of chaos, had Nehru not been there, had anybody else been there, India would have been what Pakistan is today. It is dedication to secularism, to democracy, to scientific temper, attitude, and strengthening the infrastructure, both agriculture and technology and industry, that made India today a hopeful superpower of the world. Deriding him is only cutting your nose to spite your face, and that's not acceptable. Thank you.